All right, hello and welcome to the Word Power Writers Workshop. I'm Em the Writer, and today I have author and friend and mentor of mine, Arliss Dudley-Cash, joining us for a quick talk story before we start writing. Thanks so much for being with us today, Arliss.
I'm so excited to be here. It's such an honor. Thank you.
Right on, awesome. Oh, we have someone jumping in here. Okay, so the first question I have for you, Arliss, is when did you start writing? Was there someone or something that inspired you to start writing? When did it all start?
It started very young. I was very fortunate to have a father who read to me every night while I was growing up. And so I fell in love with books at a very early age. I don't remember experiencing a time where books weren't a big part of my life. And I can still visualize my room when I was a small child, and there was a bookcase and books on it, and I got to choose which book we read each night. And I think we read Wacky Wednesdays for probably 3 months straight or something like that, because I just loved that book so much. And so when I got into reading myself as a child, I remember one of the first books I read was Louisa May Alcott, Little Women, which I think is fairly common for young women to read. And I loved the power of the imagination and being able to visualize that book and see that book come to life in my mind. And when I was, and this is kind of hard to remember, but I want to say fourth grade, maybe third or fourth grade, I wrote my first book. And it was, and I still have it. And it was 25 pages long or something like that. And I made a cover for it online on the computer. And my dad got me one of those folio things that they used to put reports in so that it was clear and you could see the cover on the top and everything. Anyway, it was so exciting. And it was called The Secret Doors. And it was about this little girl that got moved into a castle. She moved into a castle. And every day she would get up and she would go down the hall and she would discover a new secret door. And one secret door led into space, and you could float around in space and see stars and things like that. And the next secret door was like Candyland and all of these different things. And so that was my first experience writing and having a lot of fun writing. And I thought that someday that I would totally make the Secret Door book into a book. Maybe I should, I don't know. But anyway, that's where it started for me. And so it's been a love of mine for most of my life.
That is an awesome story. And I think you should definitely revisit that book. I would read it. That sounds like a lot of fun. And that's such a gift to have parents that read to you when you're little. I remember my dad reading to me when I was a kid too, and that it really, I think it impacted my love of writing and reading as well. Yeah. So the next, and welcome to the writers that are joining us. Right now, we're just talking to Arliss, and we are recording. So if you don't want to be on video, feel free to turn off your camera. No worries. And then we're going to begin the writing portion in just a few minutes. So welcome Lee, Freya, Salma, and Siobhan. Okay. So the next question I had for you is, do you have a daily writing practice or schedule? And if so, how did you develop it?
I have a daily journaling practice, which I don't know if that's the same as a daily writing practice per se. I'm very much about having intentionality in life and working on being in a place of cultivating peace within myself, even during times of challenge. And my journaling practice really helps with that. And so putting pen to paper for me, it makes it more solid or real than if I had done the intention setting or peace practice in my mind. So I do that on a daily basis. I also typically, at the end of the day, note things that I am grateful for or appreciate. As far as writing goes, I tend to go in fits and bursts. So I will go a long period of time without doing any creative writing, weeks or months. And then I will produce a whole bunch of creative writing. And it's like I almost can't help myself. Like it is just like screaming to get out of me and I have to do it. And so I do that. I also have created a way for me to do some creative writing kind of along my journey, where it supports my students. So, for instance, I give weekly journal prompts and affirmation sayings, and that is a somewhat creative writing, and I create those on a weekly basis. So, but as far as storytelling or things like that, it really happens when I'm getting ready to give a speech or I'm getting ready to write a chapter in a book or things like that.
Absolutely. I love the daily journal practice. That's something I was introduced to from reading Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way. And it's so great because sometimes you just gotta, just getting in that practice and getting your thoughts out on the page, can help you clear the way for creative writing. If it's not that day, it's, another day that week. And yeah, I can relate to that too, that the fits and bursts of creative writing, where you feel like you get an idea and you just got to get it out of you. I love when that happens. That's magical.
One of the tools that I've started using, so I used to do everything longhand, either typing or writing. But what I found was sometimes, especially when I'm telling a story that is hard for me to tell about my own life, I edit myself or censor myself. And because there's that microscopic pause that happens from brain to finger, which is not that small of a pause actually, but I'm able to edit myself, unfortunately. And so what I've started doing is using an app called Otter, which is a free app, to just sit down and tell my story, and it transcribes it into written word. And when I'm speaking out my story and I get myself in a place where I can feel like I'm speaking to a friend or I'm alone, no one's going to ever hear this, right? Even though I know eventually it's going to become a speech or something. I allow a deeper level of freedom in myself. So I don't know if that would help other people, but it helps me a lot. And it's typically the first step that I take to writing a speech or writing a chapter in a book, because I can kind of get it all out there and then start the editing process.
Wow, what a great resource. I need to use that too. It's just called Otter, and it's an app.
Yep, just like the animal.
Right on.
And if you're also doing things collaboratively with others, you can link up Otter to your Zoom, and it will transcribe notes from meetings and things like that too. So it's very multifunctional, and I highly recommend.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. So going along in that vein, do you have any additional advice for new writers or aspiring writers, maybe writers that are kind of coming back to it after being stuck or not writing for a while?
I think that there's a tendency with how accessible book publishing or publishing in general is now, to think, well, there's so much out there. What does it matter if I write? And it matters. You matter. Your story matters. What you have to say matters. Your wisdom, your expertise matter. And if one thing was going to serve all people, then we would have, one book on every subject and that's it. And that's not what we have. We have no idea how our story is going to impact somebody until it does. And so that's the first thing I would say is, even if you see a book or article or blog out there that's similar or very similar to something you want to write about it anyway, because your voice is super unique and people are going to respond to that in a different way than they would respond to that other publication. The other thing that I would say is that a lot of times putting our writing out there, especially if we're sharing things about ourselves that we don't feel positively about, or we fear that we might be judged on, there can be a fear of putting it out there, or a resistance to putting it out there. And it's still worth putting it out there. If people judge things about our lives, it says way more about them as people than it does about us and our life experience. And putting out our stories in written word or in speech, which is basically written word to verbalization, is one of the bravest things we can ever do. And there are definitely times in my life that I look back and I don't feel positively about. And I promised myself that when I started my writing and speaking journey in depth about a year ago, that I would only speak or write on those topics, the things that really scare me, the things that are hard, the things that might not be the most exciting to read about, or people might have some resistance about learning about. And people just, they need to hear those things because it creates a common humanity. And when we have common humanity, we're able to practice self-compassion and resiliency in life and in person is only, well, not only, but is mostly determined by self-compassion. So by sharing your story, even if it's hard, even if it's scary, you are creating that common humanity. You are increasing the self-compassion in this world, and you're making humans more resilient. And that's beautiful.
I love that. Yeah, I can say, as someone that's heard you speak and that's read your work, it really does give permission to other people to speak up. I know for me, I can relate to those feelings, like having a lot of difficult, kind of gnarly things in my past that I want to write about, but then I kind of get afraid of what other people are going to think. But it's like, sometimes it's like, those are the things, it's like you can't even write about anything else until you can get that stuff out, because it's almost feels like it can block you sometimes. So I'm so glad you shared that. And I want to give you, before we dive into the writing portion of the workshop, I wanted to give you a chance to talk about your book. And I'm going to put a link in the chat to your website so that our writers can find it. Break Free to Health and Vitality. Let me put a link to your website.
Thank you. I appreciate that. In all honesty, I've only, which is kind of hilarious, but I've been part of multi-author books so far, which is still a challenge in itself. And it was a way of me dipping my toe in the pool of, do I feel like I can really do this? Do I really want to be doing this? Do I have as much of a passion for writing as I think I do? And it was also a safe choice because I didn't have to write the whole book, right? So I am a part of a number of multi-author books, and my first multi-author book was Break Free to Health and Vitality. My chapter entitled I believe it's entitled Who is the Love of Your Life, is based on the very first speech I ever gave, which I remember preparing. So I had never been a public speaker, and I decided that I was going to speak for the first time. And I chose an international conference because I figured, well, if I'm only going to do this once and I totally fall on my face, at least I'll be an international speaker. And then I never have to do it again. I will have done the thing, right? So leading up to this conference, I am like losing my cookies and like can't sleep at night and the whole 9 yards for like weeks, right? And I step onto the stage, and it's a virtual stage. I mean, I didn't step anywhere. I was sitting down because I'm in Zoom. But I step onto the virtual stage for the first time, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been meaning to do my whole life. Wow, this is what it means and feels like to do what I'm actually called to do. And I gave a speech on my health journey. And the first question I asked was, who is the love of your life? And the second question I asked was, how long would it take you to name yourself? And so this chapter is about how I spent so many years hating myself and really punishing my body because of that feeling, and how my body got to a place of no more, and how I had the choice to either start loving myself and live and get healthy again, or to stay where I was in that self-hate and die. And I decided to start loving myself, which is a daily journey, a daily progress. And I have days where I don't love myself, and that's okay. And I have days where I feel very, very deep love for myself. So the message in that chapter is, don't wait. You can start today to love yourself. Loving ourselves is one of the most profound choices that we can ever make in this life. And it impacts every area of our lives. And just letting people know that my hope is that nobody would ever get to the place where their life is on the line again, like I did. Because yeah, it's not worth it. It's not worth getting to that place. And self-hate doesn't actually work. It doesn't work. If shame and blame worked, and I say this a lot, I'm sure that Emily has heard me say this at least half a dozen times, if not more. But if shame and blame worked, we would all drive the speed limit. Everyone would pay their taxes on time, and there would be no one in our prison system at all if shame and blame worked. And it doesn't. It does not work. That is not how our brain is wired. If we really want to affect change in our lives, we have to come from a place of love and acceptance. That's how change happens. When we hear the stories of people that have made miraculous changes in their lives, like coming from a place of cruelty, like acting in cruelty in their life towards others, or an addiction or things like that, they don't make that change because somebody shamed and blamed them, or they shamed and blamed themselves. They make that change because they believed at some point, they made the change to believe that they were worthy of love, that they were worthy of acceptance. And they either saw that modeled by somebody outside, or they did the work themselves and then started to express that. And once people believe that about themselves, then they're able to get to that place that I was talking about before of common humanity, and being able to see that others are worthy of love and acceptance too. So that's where that chapter comes from. And I am working on my solo book. It's called Building Business with Soul. I'm a business coach, and it will be coming out next spring.
Right on. Well, thank you for sharing all that with us. And I did put a link to Arliss's website, Soullutions, spelled like soul, SOULLUTIONS.com. Definitely check out her site, check out her books. She has a really interesting background in neuroscience, and she delves into the science behind self-love, which is so interesting, how our brains work. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your story with us, Arliss, and I'm so excited to write with you.